Hey ho, and welcome to a new video about Visionaire Studio 5, and this time I updated to the latest version of the engine, which has a lot of new features built in, but I guess this will be a content of another video. In this video about Gamepad integration I will talk mostly about the Lua side, because this is how it will use the Gamepad handlers. And it becomes more and more necessary for your games to support gamepads, because they maybe get ported to other platforms, or the people want to play the games on the sofa with the gamepad. And that's why we should talk about this topic. There are a few different approaches to handle the controls itself. There are different ways to control your character, but because it's a classic point-and-click engine, I will try to use a more classic approach. The engine uses the SDL libraries, so it should work with all SDL-capable controllers. Of course, it's difficult to have every controller ready and test and built in your engine. So, of course, there are people out there in the internet which already did it. We go to GitHub and we have the site. When you search for game controllers db.txt, you will find this GitHub page, which had the following license, so we could use it for any purpose. We can use this database or this file, which we can copy into our game directory. You see there are a lot of controllers listed already. Nearly every controller, I guess, which is recently on the market. This file we will use, and if you have an SDL capable controller which is not inside here, you can add it to the file, add a line to it, and enhance it. There are different ways to do it, to get your line into the file. Firstly, you see the line, how it looks, the GUID of the controller, the name of the controller. You could probably check for this name or print it in your game into the game menu or something like that. And after that, there are the buttons, how they are defined. Button A is button 1, and whatever button 1 is on your gamepad will be used for A. Mostly it's the button with the printed A on it. As far as your controller is capable of SDL, it should work. SDL is the simple direct media layer, of course, and here I will talk about how to use the SDL controller. You could use Steam here in big picture mode to get your controller configured. You could also use this SDL to gamepad tool, which I opened here. It's downloadable for Windows, OS X, and Linux. And I downloaded it, and I will start it to show you how you can create your own or check if your controller is in this library. As you can see, it already detects my Xbox controller. It's an Xbox One controller because it was already in the database. Funny, it's getting its database out of this GitHub library, so it's up to date. If your gamepad is available here with the name, you could it's already there. You can use the file and it should work right out of the box. If your controller doesn't show up here with the name, you may have to create a new mapping and copy the mapping string into the file. Currently we are not using this tool to create a new line because we already have my game controller in the file. We download the file and put it into our game directory. Under Mac US you will find it under your username, library, application support. Visionaire Tutorial is my company name in this case, it's optional, and at last the game name. There we put it in beside the config ini and save games folder, and there it is. And go back into the engine. This should work out right now. When we start our game, I'm in our tutorial project. Yeah, when I start my game, we should see in the console that the database is recognized, and hopefully my Xbox controller also is recognized. We press tab and go into the log, and we see, yeah, the 2 lines. Okay. Right now, when I click onto the controller, we have no reaction because there is no script which handles the inputs. So this is what we want to do next. And this is the main reason why this video is created, obviously. So we go into our script section and create a new definition script. So check that the checkmark is ticked at the definition script above. We could also use this script for handling keyboard input, because here in this dropdown we don't have every key on the keyboard available. So it could be used to also detect specific keys or have an extended use of the keyboard keys. So we call our script Gamepad. And I thought about different approaches, as mentioned earlier. You can control the character by controlling him directly. So when you have the analog stick move to one edge, or the D-pad, the character moves directly to that direction. But I think this is a bit breaking with the point and click adventure style. So it's more likely, for me at least, to control the cursor with the analog stick as if it's the mouse. So this is what we will do right now today. Also, I will try to simulate the left click by pressing A, the right click by gamepad button B, and I will try to make it more gamepad friendly by holding the right trigger to make the cursor more precisely, so that it's not so difficult to hit the right spots. Okay. We try to create a function which we will register to the event handler, which gets triggered by key presses. We will call it, because it's also capable of keyboard inputs, I guess we will call it keyboard handler. And then, of course, I will rename this script also Gamepad Keyboard to make it more obvious. But right now we are also only doing the gamepad stuff in it. There are multiple parameters you can put into, which are given by the event. The first parameter is the event type. This is used to define where the function was called from. What was it called from? The keyboard, or was it called from a gamepad, for example? Then the character itself, which was pressed. For example, on a keyboard, it would use the exact character which was pressed. The key code also is more necessary for us. and also a modifier, which is for us not that necessary right now. So we will register the keyboard handler to the key event. So this function above will be called when the key event gets triggered. So obviously every time a key is pressed. Okay. The parameters above, we don't need to put it in the keyboard handler there. Okay, then we have to define what happened right now. So was the key related to the gamepad, or was the key related to the keyboard, for example? So we ask in an if case if the event type is from the type event or evt controller key up. Then we do something. This controller key up is a Visionaire own related event type. And of course there is the counterpart of this type. It's called event controller key down. Okay. So we don't have a normal else, but an else if, because with a normal else, every keyboard input would go also in there. So right now we have only controller buttons which were pressed or released. Obviously, the analog sticks or the left and right triggers are not really pressed. They are moved. So this is another key type which we have to trigger or ask for. This event type is called event controller axis. So let's write it here. So this gets triggered when the axis changes. So these are our three event types which we want to get from our controller to work with it. For test purposes, I will print out the key code, I guess. Makes more sense. And wait, I will use it inside the if cases to print out what was done here. So here we use the key up, and the key down is below, and here we have the trigger, but the trigger uses the character to define the key. Okay, we are inside the game now, and it should. Oh wait, the function has to return a Boolean value because the engine itself wants to use the keys in the game settings also. So we make return false to allow the engine to use also the keys and gamepad. If we put in true, I assume that it will be blocked for the key handler in the engine itself. So, okay. Error is done. Let's see. The thing you see right now in the console, the single left click, was related to another test. It had nothing to do with the engine. Okay, I press A. I press B and hold it. I release, okay. Analog stick, and nothing happens, okay. Maybe I made a mistake there. Let's have a look. Okay, but every button you see I press, if it's A, B, or whatever, X, Y, the shoulder buttons, start, select, everything works, the D-pad, okay. Let's see, Y is here, okay. Let's test it again. Okay, now the left trigger, this is the left analog stick, this is the right analog stick. It gets recognized, but we don't have something in what really happens to them. But that's for a later point here. We will handle this later. Okay, I comment this out and see what we do when we have the key up. In the Visionaire forum, there was a different approach. There was every key was handled inside this function, because this gets a bit messy if you have several keys and also keyboard handling. It gets a bit weird and the function gets extended to a weird amount, and it could be confusing. So we will outsource these to own functions. So when the A button is called or pressed down or up, we call a different function, and yeah, this will make it obviously more easy to recognize what will happen when. So we will use the key code as you saw in the console, in the log. Yeah, obviously you have to check which key code comes up when I press to the a specific button. So I know what is what key. So the key code for the A button has 10000001. That's obviously the first key, button 1. And this will call a function which we will create later. I call it GP for Gamepad, the key name A in this case, and it was released so up. And for the B button, it's key code 10000002, I guess. And we will call another function which has the B inside, of course. And that's yeah, that we will do it for every keys for which you want to implement into your game. In my case, we only have the A key, the B key, and the start button, I guess, for imitating the escape key. So the start key or the select key, I'm not sure, has the 7, and it will call this function. And of course, the counterpart of it will be the down functions we will call when the event type is event controller key down. So we will rename them to these commands or these functions. And for the controller, oh wait, we also need the shoulder buttons for scrolling the inventory. We have already built in the scrolling in a previous video where we can use the mouse scroll button to scroll through the inventory. And these buttons will call the same functions. So we have gamepad left shoulder down and gamepad right shoulder down as a specific function. Obviously, we could call the mouse, the scroll function directly from here, but yeah, I will do it right now, how we see it. Okay, now next are the controller analog triggers, and the analog left stick we will use to control the mouse and to handle the hotspot view and to slow down the mouse to make it more precisely. It's especially good in low resolution games to have a more precise mouse under specific circumstances. So it's handled a bit differently. We have the left X analog stick is used or checked by the character left X, and the same we do with the Y axis, and this will call another function. And the same goes for the the same goes for the trigger, which are also analog. So let's see. The names of these are wait, I have to look into my notes. Trigger left and trigger right. Okay, let's see. Trigger left. So these names come from Visionaire, so it's obviously that it only works when you call them like so. But the functions you are putting in here are obviously different, maybe in your case. So also they contain the key code, or you need the key code from the keyboard handler above. But because I outsourced it to different functions, I have to pass the key code in the function. Okay, I try to create the functions. And I will try to begin with A and B buttons, because they are obviously the most easy steps to do here. What will happen when we press A? Obviously, we need to imitate the left click and imitate the right click. First, I will try to do the key pressing. There is a function which is called create event, and this will obviously create a keyboard event and or mouse event. In this case, E event mouse left button down. It's all documented in the Lua documentation of Visionaire Studio, which event types are available for this. So the release of the A button will create an event with the event mouse left button up. And the same goes for, of course, the button B with right in the name. And now by pressing the B or by releasing the B, we can check for a specific rule. B should used also as an escape when we are inside a menu. It should only use the right click to open the inventory by default. So if we are inside the save and load menu in this case, we can use or we can create an escape key event. So above in the if, you obviously need to combine different conditions with an OR to handle all events, all menus. The escape key is created a bit differently. It has some parameters you need to give with the function. So the event type is event key up. The second parameter is the coordinates, which is not necessary or not used by key presses, but is still necessary for the function to get called correctly. The key which is should be registered for a key up is the escape key, and we have no modifier. So now the button is the B button calls the right click in every time, but if you have a menu, it's used as escape. Okay, the next thing we have is the scrolling. As mentioned before, you may will call the functions directly above, but because this video was recorded previously in completely German, I oversaw it. So you can directly call this scroll function directly above in the keyboard handler. In this case, I call it in its own function, but it's working nonetheless. Okay. We scroll up with the shoulder left and down with shoulder right. The start button, let's see. The start button down. I don't really need it. I will delete it here. We only need the start button up because that's what will trigger the key pressing in our case. So we want to also trigger a key event, which is obviously also escape. And it's imitating the escape key. Okay. Now the more difficult or more intense stuff. Let's say it like that. I create the functions, and let's see. And we need to differentiate what happens to the triggers. When the key code is above 1, then the event should be called, which imitates the space key, because the left trigger should show the hotspots when the when the trigger is pressed. Because we have to check down and up, so when it's pressed, the value is greater than 1, it will trigger the event key down with the space key, and if it's below, it will trigger the up event. Oh wait, this has to be in the trigger function. The above one will be used for the mouse controls, so when to move the mouse. The right trigger is a bit more specific. Here we want not to replace a key press. We want to change the mouse speed for the gamepad. So I will create some variables here above. Also, we need some other values later for the mouse movement, so I created right away. Mouse X and YZ will be used for the analog stick later. And we have the variable, I call it mouse speed. It's currently set to 30. This is your actual mouse speed, which is used also for the mouse, the analog mouse functions. I think it's the amount of pixel which will be scrolled all the time. I'm not sure, but here you can play a bit around for your game. And also I will use the right shoulder pressed and A button pressed as different variables. You could also use them as booleans, but I did it as variables here. I'm not sure why. The last two variables will be used to check which of the both keys are pressed to determine when the verb coin is open, if we are allowed to move faster. So if the verb coin is open, we force the slower speed to make it more precisely to select the verbs. Okay, you will see how this will work. So first we will check the key code again. So it's obviously the same as the left trigger. So we will check if the key code the key is pressed. When it's pressed, we will set the variable to 1, and our mouse speed will be slowed down. The higher the number, the slower the mouse later. And when we release the key, it gets set to 0, but only if the A button is pressed. If the A button is not pressed, the mouse speed is set back to 30. So let's see. Only when the mouse pad is not pressed. Okay. That's because we want to force the verb coin to have the precise cursor. Okay. Also, we need to insert some of the variables inside our A down and A up functions. We need to set the variables to 1 so that the function below we created earlier knows what to do. And the mouse speed, of course, is 60, so it's slower. And here we revert it. So, but only we set the mouse speed back to 30 if the right shoulder trigger is not held down. So to make the mouse movement functioning, so we can't use it right now, we have to use the analog left X and analog left Y. So we set the mouse X variable to the key code, and then we create an event which will which has an own description. It's called event controller axis mouse move. Okay, and it will have some more parameters. It will contain the mouse coordinates, and as you can see, the X coordinate was previously, or the key code is contains the new X position for the mouse. And the third parameter is the key code, which is here used as the mouse speed. And modifier is 1 in this case. And the same goes for the Y coordinate, which will change the mouse Y here. And the create event call is exactly the same. Okay, in theory, this should work right now. Let's see. Okay. Okay, then we will have a look to the game. Okay, controller still is recognized. We go into the lock. Let's move it to the right a bit. So, okay, you see the left trigger is working. It also prints out the strength from 0 to 100, and above 1 it will show the hotspots. The left trigger seems to have some errors still. I have to look at that later. This the right trigger will also work. Okay, analog stick. The A button seems not to work either. I have a look also at that. Let's have a look. Create event on line 76 and 72. So let's see, what do we have here? Create okay. It has to be called create event. Okay. Let's see. Oh, and it seems to also fix the A button already. Okay. As you can see, the gamepad mouse, or the gamepad trigger moves the mouse. It moves quite fast. Yeah, it depends on what you set in your script. And when I press the right shoulder, you are moving it more precisely. In normal case, you want to move fast from one point to another, and with the gamepad it's a bit difficult because you have always the same speed without acceleration, and especially in for small objects, or and especially in pixel games, you maybe are too fast to get exactly to the point where you want to. So smaller, precise. The precise speed is better for this. Yeah, we open the verb coin here, and we see that the precise cursor is activated by that automatically. So I can release the trigger, and it will still be slower. But as soon as I close the menu, it will continue to move fast. At least if I don't press the trigger key already, then it's still slow. Okay, I can open the inventory with B. That's working, yeah, and that's it. So far from me, I hope I covered everything related to gamepads, at least for the basic purposes. I hope you liked it, and yeah, we will see you soon, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.